I make the world graphical.
I add value through my products.
I am an animator.
I am a filmmaker. I develop trends.
I transform designs to reality.
I create environments.
I translate stories to furniture.
I design experiences. I am an immersive media designer.
I design mobility.
This is not only a design institute.
This is a design lab.
Join us in our design movement.
Hello and good morning everyone. I welcome you all to the series of webinars and workshops by MIT Institute of Design. Since last 5 years, as a part of Design Connect program, we are interacting with design aspirants through various webinars and workshops where experts share their experiences with the young budding designers. This year, we have moved one step ahead by keeping these sessions more interactive and engaging students to get hands-on experience on various topics of design. So here we are, today's Design Connect, Brand Ki Baatein by Dr. Ranjana Dani, Professor in Graphic Design at MIT Institute of Design, MIT ADT University, Pune, and by Professor Parag Chitle, Assistant Professor in Graphic Design at MIT Institute of Design, MIT ADT University, Pune. I feel honored to welcome and introduce our speakers for today's Design Connect. Dr. Ranjana Dani is a senior faculty in Graphic Design Department of MIT Institute of Design. She has been with the institute as an HOD Graphic Design for a stint of more than 7 years, completed PhD on the subject Analysis Case Studies to establish the significance of color in brand design. As an experienced teacher, teaching graphic design, visualization, advertising, marketing theory and branding, and innovation strategy, she is committed to the core and ever striving for continuous development of relevant skills in the students through innovative concepts and methods regarding content and application. She also had a vast experience as a freelancing designer working in areas from brand design to textile design. She has enjoyed the status of a professional artist by developing a distinctive style and has also held numerous exhibitions in India and abroad. A continuous interaction with design institutes and advertising firms has empowered her to stay abreast with contemporary trends. Professor Parag, an alumnus of National Institute of Design India, has previous experience working as a graphic designer in Penguin Random House India, one of India's leading publishing houses. He has designed covers and insights for a wide range of publications ranging from illustrated books to classic novels. Working across the graphic design domain along with art direction, illustrations and print production design, this self-made conversationalist enjoys spontaneous, well-planned adventures. Maintaining a good balance between work and life and the fact of fiction, he signs, writes, paints and works with textiles to communicate beyond spoken words. So now I request to Professor Parag to please take over the further proceedings of the session. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bhavika. Before we begin with our Brand Ki Baatein, let's take a look at MIT ADT University and get to know who we are. MIT ADT University is located in Loni Karbhur, Pune, and it has two main clusters of technology and management and creative cluster with institutes across the clusters around 16 institutes in campus. The vision of MIT ADT University is to have a transformative impact on society, and the initiatives that are taken by the university like KRIA and Incubator do support that vision. Coming to the MIT Institute of Design, the vision for the institute is to nurture a design research and education ecosystem, and through craft of design for a better life on planet Earth, the mission supports the vision of MIT Institute of Design. Established in 2006, there are more than 70 plus faculty members at MIT Institute of Design with state-of-the-art labs and studios and maker spaces where we actually get to do things and learn through the process. There are around 4 main verticals of industrial design, communication design, fashion and management, and 12 undergraduate programs and 14 master's programs with a PhD program that MIT Institute of Design offers. In each of these verticals, there are several specialized courses that MIT Institute of Design offers, and one of them definitely is the graphic design program under the communication vertical, and we are going to go in depth of that particular stream today. There is a strong leadership team of successful and accomplished designers leading the several departments, and the aims and objectives of the Center of Excellence at MIT is to have fundamental and applied research to help propagate the design thinking that happens at MIT Institute of Design. MIT Institute of Design, you can log on to the website and get to know a little bit more about what we do and who we are and how we think. Now, I will request Professor Ranjana Dani to introduce us to the talk that we are going to have today about brands. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Parag. A very good morning to all. It's indeed an honor and privilege to be part of the MIT legacy, a legacy that offers varied educational offerings. As part of the MIT Institute of Design, it has been a challenging journey to establish this institute on the design educational map as one of the benchmark destinations in design learning. So I'm from graphic design and we will be talking about brands today. In the department, it's been our endeavor to constantly evolve through updations with new technologies as also teaching methodologies. Our valuable tie-ups with the industry have provided scope and opportunities for learning beyond the classrooms. Definitely, going to where our students are today, there's a great sense of pride as we see our alumni working with some of the top brands. So what is brands? And that's what we are going to talk about today. We see brands all around us, and there are 2 very, very simple observations that I'm going to make at the onset before we move ahead to the presentation. So, have any of you ever recently bought a product or service? Don't most of us buy brands? And do we buy brands? Possibly we are buying brands, but no, not actually, we are choosing them. So people are not buying products, they are buying brands, and people are not buying brands, they are choosing them. So in today's cluttered markets, it is a huge challenge for designers to design newer brands, fresher ideas, and establish a differentiation in the cluttered market and put out your brand with that differentiation which says, I'm not a me too, but look at me, I'm someone special. I'm someone that you can connect with, and I'm someone that can definitely make your world, your life, a lifestyle that you can look forward to. I'm going to ask Parag to move ahead to the presentation, and as we show you all the slides, we will be taking you through some deeper tips on things. But yes, do ask us lots of questions on the way, so it can be a more interactive session.
Hello, and now it's back to Brands Ki Baatein. It's going to be simply an introduction to the world of semiotics, signs, symbols, and communication design for brands. I know these words might seem little foreign to some of us. What is semiotics? What exactly is science? We know what science are, but then what is different about science in context of communication design? But don't worry, that's what we are going to look about today. A little bit about us, MIT and graphic design, and Ranjana ma'am and me. Now you know us a little bit better. Let's move on to design as a problem-solving activity. Design is not essentially to make things look pretty or make things look aesthetic, quote unquote, but essentially it is to solve a problem that you have identified all around us.
So some of the important elements that we utilize or craft in terms of the visual language for communication is definitely some words that you might have heard and some others. We're going to go on with that. Typography, I'm sure a lot of people know about. I'm sure you know what pictures are, whether they are illustrations or photographs. We also craft color palettes and so much more, using all these elements across various different projects. So there's a packaging project, there are publication designs. Our students even go to nitty-gritties of data interpretation and studying the history of design. Moving ahead, we will go to what the term brand really means, but let's start with communication design.
Yeah, so today we are going to understand semiotics, signs, symbols, branding strategies, but definitely everything is connected through communication design. And to make it easier for us to get in touch with things around us, let's start with an example. Things that we see around us, as we know we live in a very visual world and everything is making an impact. Everything is essentially graphic design all around us. So Amul, all of us have seen these advertisements across billboards and newspapers. We have seen the packagings, we have seen the shops and the products that there are. So essentially what it is that there is a brand presence. The visual identity, the visual presence of the brand is evident all around us. All these different touch points, another word that we will get into, is what all these things around us are. What are
so
they?
Like I said earlier, is it the brand that you buy?
Exactly.
Or are you buying butter and ice cream? If you're buying Amul, you're choosing Amul amongst so many other butter or ice cream brands that are there. And it is this in terms of a visual identity, also in terms of a specific color palette, maybe the entire look and feel. I think they have set a precedent to how humor as an appeal can beautifully extend this particular brand and reach the hearts of millions so seamlessly. And that's what brands do. They make intangible experiences tangible through so many experiences that people connect with them through. Like Parag said, of course, there have to be touch points. So there's that packaging design there, and there's a hoarding, and there's this whole array of product packaging that can be available at any of their typical stores.
So now that we know that this is what communication design in the context of brands is, what exactly is communication design all around us? So we have just put some words up on the slide.
If you see the slide and look at these words, do any of these words mean anything to you? Do you think you can find a connect? Do you think maximalism means something? Do you know what ethnography is? Have you heard of dinks? Okay, so I'm not going to elaborate so many of the words today. However, just to give you a cue of how detailed we go into thinking and planning brand design, I'm just going to tell you about one interesting target group, which is the dinks. And dinks is double income, no kids. Yes, there is a target audience like that for which brands are specially designed. And then if you go through all the other words, quickly Google maybe, you will find a relevance with that to brands.
So for any sort of design process, where would we start? How do we begin to understand where to start? And it's exactly what we did in our school days. we ask questions, and it's important for us to know what questions to ask. So the basic WH questions that we learned in school, why, who, what, where, when, all these questions are extremely important, not just relevant for branding as a design practice. We'll start with why. Why are we doing whatever we are doing? It sounds like a very simple question to begin with, like we are doing this for something, but that something has a lot of depth in it. There are so many things, as we just saw, to think before we try to answer what this why is. So this why can be to inform about something. This why is to create awareness about a particular issue that you have identified. This why in the context of branding is definitely for the brand to persuade the target to choose that particular brand in the whole crowd. And essentially it is to facilitate the service that the brand is offering.
It's also helping people to change their mindsets from something that they were unaware of regarding something that they might be needing. So it's about understanding people's aspirations, hidden aspirations, and then converting them. So changing mindsets is a huge, huge challenge in brand design as well.
And then who are we designing for? Who are the people? A very, very, very important word that one can never forget about any design is that it is about people. So who is our target? Who is our audience? Who is going to be using the service and who is going to consume the service? Again, there are so many layers to unpack. I mean, Ranjana ma'am and I can discuss this one slide for half an hour.
So we all know design is user-centric, right? However, today it is not so much about broad categories of users or target audiences. There's further segmentation, like I told you about drinks, and just in the basic category of, say, youngsters, there can be so many varieties of the same, and unless you reach the core of who you're exactly focusing on, you will not be able to understand what to design and to come to the exactness of the solution. And that's where you come to segmentation, and of course that is a huge space for study, whether it is to do with consumer study at the onset, going to psychology, and also to motivational research.
And then comes the part which is very, very relevant to us, is what we're going to design. I know as design students, as aspiring design students, this is something that's the most attractive part of graphic design, something that is visual in its core. So what we are designing is essentially a series of advertisements. There are brand identities that define what the brand will look like, the look and feel for it. And then there are all these allied domains which are connected to the brand extensions, like publications. So we see brochures and we see booklets about a particular brand. There are signages when we are designing a space for a brand. If there is a big office that is dedicated to a particular company, a brand, then of course the signages that are in coherence with the visual language, we will design that as well. There is packaging. I mean, right now if I just say Flipkart, you thought of that yellow and you thought of that blue, and that is how the brand presence is so effective, that you thought of the brand, you thought of the packaging that it comes in with.
We all know about Cadbury, right? And at the onset, when you look at Cadbury, the logo is absolutely unforgettable. It's there not just on everybody's minds and you can almost see it, but it's definitely on everybody's tongue. And that in the context of various experiences that it engages in and extends about itself. There was a lovely campaign that talked about how far will you go for love. We all connect Cadbury to love today. And that's a beautiful way to extend the brand experience.
And just adding on to that, one more thing, what has changed in the recent year is that everything has become very much digital. We live in a graphic, yet a very digital graphic world. So every single brand extension has a space in the digital world as well. So every brand is now coming up with their own website, with their applications and their films and their infographics and motion graphics. So the very dated stereotypical notion of graphic design being print design is definitely evolving, and it is encompassing everything that is around us. And now that we are living in a digital world, I mean, to be very honest, for the last 2 years, everyone was living on screen. So definitely brands will also live on screen. And so the brand extensions will make sure that we reach to the audience, the who that we identified, through all these different touch points.
So the brand identity typically is just the first point. It's just the start of the story. And then you see it being experienced across various touch points from print to digital media.
And yes, this is where I was headed, that where do we actually make this design happen? Now we know we are going to make an advertisement. Okay, is it going to go in a newspaper? Is it going to go on, say, a Facebook ad? Is it going to be motion? Is it going to be an Insta reel for that matter? So what exactly it is going to do? Is it going to inform? Is it going to create awareness? So all these different important intentions for your design, they help you choose what needs to be done. It's like, if I have just a little bit of hunger, I might not go for a whole thali. I'll just go and have bhel. At that point, bhel was the necessary thing that needed to be done. Exactly for our brand extensions, if the need is to make sure that the presence is felt without giving a very deep message, you will go for a solution that is just that catchy and that hooks and that pulls you in. So understanding where we actually work with our design is extremely important. And yes, so now what all is there about brands? What all can be done? If you just look at the words and look at the logos, there is Maruti, there is Godrej, there are different fonts, there are educational books, there are wall graphics, signages, CD covers, online shopping, websites for cry and everything. So one thing that is connecting all those different types of visual design that we see around us, it is all about a brand. Everything is about brand. They are all connected with the fact that it is all about branding. But now we know very briefly that what are the different ways where we can think about brand as part of graphic design. But let's get a little deeper and try to understand what is it making me feel? What is it saying?
So just as you obviously see that each brand has a different name, the nomenclature, and you also see that it has a different look, which has been crafted through a certain choice of typography, the visual elements, the color palette, each one depicting possibly what the brand offers, possibly what the brand wants to establish its persona to be, its personality to be, and in some way little ideas about what the vision or mission or thinking might be of what that brand stands for. So Reliance as a name is vastly different from Godrej. We all know about both these brands. There are some very beautiful, sensitive brands that work in the sustainable space, such as Cry and others. Let's try and see what goes behind building these brands in terms of its visual personality.
And there comes the word semiotics. Semiotics, if you don't know about it, now we'll get a very brief idea. It's such a deep subject, and we can go in depth as much as we can, but we'll at least try to understand today that what does semiotic do, what is it, very easily. It is a study of how meanings are made and how reality is represented. Okay, so there are two things that are very important here. One is representation of reality, representation of real life things that we see around us, and second is making meaning out of it. Okay, so there are...
So very typically, semiotics is the study of signs and symbols. And when you look at signs and symbols, we're possibly going to just touch upon some basics within the space. And you see signs which are of a direct kind. They're called icons. There are others which are indexial, which have an association, and hence the index to something, context to something. And then there is the symbol, which is possibly an arbitrary form, which grows with you through association, and the meaning of and feeling of it is established or connected in terms of how you realize it over time.
So just to make it a little easier to understand this particular slide, if it's not clear to some of you, when we see icons, we immediately know, without thinking, anyone would know that this is about male and female figures. If we look at the index, if we know that this is a man's shoe and this is a woman's shoe, then we realize that, oh, this is about a man and a woman, a male and a female. And the third symbol, if you show this symbol to a child who hasn't been introduced to the idea of this circle with arrow is indicative of a male, the child wouldn't understand. But as we grow up with social conventions and habits and social rules, we understand this by thinking about it. So icons being very direct, index literally just points to, okay, this is what I'm talking about, and symbols, they make you think a little bit more. So these three basic types of signs, combinations and development of this is what leads to essentially an identity. So now, what is a brand? I will definitely let Ranjana talk about this.
So yeah, I mean, there's some really huge and very sort of deep, very meaningful definitions of the word. However, one of the simplest and the easiest way to understand brands is to really just go back to, since brands are about products and services. So products were born in factories. They became brands when they reached the head and the heart of the consumer. So this as the larger experience, and not just as the basic, tangible, functional aspect of a product, becomes the realization of a product into a brand. So obviously, brands are more than just a product. They are definitely more than just a service or an identity of the same. I said earlier, it's an experience. So it's synonymous with businesses. It's synonymous with their philosophy, the spirit, definitely the values, the vision and mission, and attitude. The image and style, and definitely in this format you can see it's a larger experience. What we see as the obvious, or through which we reach these various aspects, could be the obvious offerings such as the products, or the obvious touch points of a communication that comes our way, whether it is the identity or the ad for it, or maybe a packaging that extends the brand's face to us in a physicality. But through every touch point, the larger experience of the brand is essentially what becomes the base for any designer to take up as a challenge to infuse into these touch points.
And there comes the word strategy. How do we make sure that all these different concepts about brand are we going to realize in visual design or any sort of communication touch point? So strategy and strategists essentially play a vital role in creating substantial business model for brands. And this is very important for us to understand that branding is a commercial activity at its core. We are definitely influencing, persuading people to get connected with the brand and effectively access that service or access that experience that the brand is offering. So with extension to the strategists, designers play an important role in crafting and establishing that brand presence. Both of us are just talking about brand presence and it being an experiential thing, and it is what it is, that the intangible emotions, the context and essence of every single philosophy, the attitude, the feel of that brand, we need to make sure that it is reaching the consumer, because that is what matters most. That when I think about say Nike, I immediately have a response to just listening to that name, listening to the name of the brand, and that attitude of sportsmanship, that attitude of get moving and just do it, as the brand tagline says, it is percolating in every single thing that Nike does, even if it's just a tiny advertisement, if it's a campaign, if it's packaging, everywhere that attitude is reflected. And it also reflects in the business, the way they run. It's not just about, again, making things look nice, it's also making them meaningful, and that's where strategy comes in place.
So to summarize, for any designer, it is not relevant or important only to look at a visual language, starting with an identity design and how great a color will look or feel to extend the brand attitude, as Parag pointed out. It's the strategy that is developed behind it, and for every designer it becomes significant to align to that strategy with a certain level of depth, with a certain level of understanding, and possibly research the entire context of the business themselves to be clear about what the strategy is and how the strategy will establish itself or articulate itself or can present itself, communicate itself through the brand touchpoints.
And there we are, our beloved and not so beloved Starbucks. Why I certainly chose this as an example, because the sheer presence of Starbucks extended across our life, and it's coffee. It's just one thing that we probably do.
Okay, so Parag, let me tell them the story.
Yeah.
So, do you come to Starbucks for coffee? I'm sure that's not the only reason. You're coming here to possibly jam with your friends, or maybe to strike a deal with somebody for a business meet that you have come together for. It's a gang of girls that's just meeting after a long time, and coffee becomes one of the many reasons or many aspects that you might want to consider while you're around. Of course, over time, we've all become so very knowledgeable about the types of coffees that we can have. In India, at one point, starting from the basic coffees and then moving into the variants from across the world is what Starbucks brought to the table. However, if you look at the identity and if you look at the imagery there, if you look at the color palette across, because it's the space that extends all these aspects, what do you catch? Do you really catch that at level 1, or do you catch that over time through experience? Do you start relating to Starbucks as your destination to be when you want to have a serious business meet? Do you want to come here for just meeting up with friends, and then Starbucks becomes the opportune place to do that? So what is Starbucks? At the end of the day, it's definitely more than just a coffee place. And that then is what the brand experience is about. And that's what we're talking about from the onset. It's more than just the identity. You find the experience through various interesting touch points like, of course, the coffee and the tastes. Possibly the whiff of the smell comes as soon as you enter the door, and that's one great touch point of who the brand is. But going ahead to the store space, definitely the packaging, the digital pages of the website that you've possibly seen before, or the large screen that you see in that space. Definitely the merchandise is huge as a touch point. And the brochures, folders, the menu card on the table. Now all these become the viable touch points through which you understand and experience the brand. But again, coming back to the same question, is it just a coffee space today? No, it's not. It's much more. And that larger experience of what the brand is what people have started relating to. Their aspirations have moved beyond just coming to a place to have coffee, but to a place that means much more through coffee. And possibly that is what we're talking about when we say the brand experience is the big or the larger thing that designers are looking at or generating through their design solutions.
And this is what a brand promises, where a brand becomes stronger when you know what the brand is offering. So just look at the logos on your screen. There is Coca-Cola, there is G, there is Unilever, Harley Davidson, of course Apple.
So like I said earlier, every brand has lots to offer, right? But when you narrow the focus, the clarity establishes itself. So most brands use something that is called a tagline. Apple says, think different. And that's the larger ideology established in so many different ways.
Unilever, for example, has adding vitality to life. So this idea, I'll use the word brand promise, is actually, you can see it's reflecting in its products, in its strategies, and even the identity that is developed for Unilever. GE, Harley Davidson, think about Coca-Cola, happiness in a bottle, which cannot be truer. Like, I was just discussing a design project with a student of mine, and we discussed the same thing, that how a simplest of idea, that happiness in a bottle, is extended through colors. And with Coca-Cola, now it is almost synonymous that when you have to have a good time, you have a Coke and you just chill. So when you have a specific idea, then focused intention of your communication, there is immense scope to expand the experience and go beyond just visual part of branding. So how do we do that? It is amplifying your brand, your positioning of the brand, and the essence of the brand. So when I talk about amplifying, ma'am, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so not to take a class here, but you know, some core aspects that one will be designing when you're designing for brands. We are looking at core values of businesses. We are looking at the brands or the business's attributes. We are looking at a competitive advantage. I talked about differentiation earlier. And we are looking at strategies. The second big thing here is definitely positioning, because in a cluttered market, when you don't want to be a me too, but you want to be something specific and significant, then you talk about a value proposition that sets you apart. Of course, you start fitting slowly with experience and use into a certain business category. You become a premium brand, you become a reasonable brand, you become an empathetic brand. So brand essence is another quotient where the central idea of the brand starts becoming apparent over time. It unifies all the various touch points into one unifying concept. There's always a key message that you'll find in every brand: overuse. Can you see it at the beginning? Is that the obvious intention of every designer? No. It's possibly something that is definitely strategically planned, but very, very gently inserted into various touch points to be experienced over time. Every brand must have a very, very deliberate look and feel and tone of voice when a designer sets out to create its visual language.
And then this, I'm pretty sure none of you know about. There are two ways of thinking about brands. One is inside out and one is outside in. So what the name suggests, inside out is you start with the stakeholders and the core people in the brand, the core values of the brand. It is the focus on aligning the brand activities. It is based on the vision for the future. And if you look at it the other way, the outside in approach, then it is about the user, it is about the consumer more than the user, because everything definitely is about the user. But it is about solving a key point, a key pain point, and then it is about consumer trends. So that's why if you think about Dairy Milk, a very good example, the advertisements or the campaigns that go in Jan and February are very much different in India than they are in, say, October and November, because as we all know, October and November is the time when all the festivities are happening. So everything is aligned towards that trend that will attract the consumers. And then in Jan and Feb, of course, as we are leading to the 14th Feb, everything is focused towards that. Everything is about that. So it is a consumer-led approach to brand.
So what we put out over here is just two interesting facts for you. Just let's look at brands and the types that they can be. So there are the inside-out brands, which are more stakeholder-led. And there are the outside-in brands, which are consumer-led. You'll see the examples over here. So Dove is definitely about the consumer that motivates a brand to even be born. And if you look at the stakeholder-led brand, there's a strong business ideology or a business logic or a business plan there, whether it is from Unilever or IBM, as to how or what they want to set out there and what they want to facilitate the communities with.
So now we'll come to the golden circle. We'll move on to the next slide where we get a little deeper, which is encapsulating what we just discussed, the 4 questions that we had, that who, why, what, where and how. So this slide sort of summarizes the different aspects of designing for communication and the core of the brand. But now,
so like we said earlier, how does a brand really get designed, and what are the steps or the stages that you take while designing for a brand? So definitely it's the who, which is what is the brand for? Who am I? Is the first question that the brand wants to answer when they start designing for a certain business. So the core values, the personality traits. What gives you answers with reference to the offerings of a brand, or the differentiation in a cluttered market that they will establish to set themselves apart? How do you do it? Would be, how would you want a target audience to perceive you? How will you connect with the target audience? And that gives you answers about how will you design for a brand. Where is definitely the market space or the various other platforms, whether print or digital, that you will establish or set yourselves in terms of the touch points through which the consumers will connect with you or grasp you.
Ma'am just used the word personality traits, and this is something very interesting for all of us to know, that there are brand archetypes where there are different types of brand personalities. I know, like, it's a concept, it's a company, but now we know that to its core it has a message, right? So it has an attitude, and how do we connect with it is through the different types of personalities these brands project, and that's how we get to know them. So just taking you through the different representative archetypes, let's say, if you think about Dove, the innocent. If you think about Audi, it's the sage who has this authority to it. Then we have the explorer, there is the hero, there is the magician. So there is this sense of going beyond what we know. There is this sense of a new experience that Apple definitely offers with all its touch points. There is this rebel attitude that Harley Davidson has. And then we have the regular guy, that is IKEA, that is definitely helping you with your life. Then we have the Jester, and Skittles being a very fun brand in itself. It suits the personality to the point. Then we have the lover, the ruler, and the caregiver, the creator. So all these, again, this is not an exhaustive list, this is just a representative list. All of them have a different attitude. You can imagine these brands as people around you and how they are influencing, how they matter to you at the end of the day.
So these are some simple words in which each brand has been given a personality, and through these words you can identify or expand what this brand might be establishing as who it is, what it offers, where it stands, and what largely it wants to say about itself. Over time, people start associating with brands as the sage or the hero.
So now we'll come to the visual design for brands, where without getting in too much depth, because I mean this is not a classlet, we are just discussing things about design.
Let's look at how we convert the brand experience from certain intangible pointers or cues to tangible visual language. So what all do you use when you design for a brand? There are design inspirations that each one takes as a designer. The challenge is to take references from across stuff that is around you, to look at trends, to look at trends for composition styles, maybe imagery as how people are using it, maybe in the digital space as of how gradients and layering is becoming a very, very significant aspect. Typography is becoming huge, where brands are actually designing their own logo type to create the differentiation and to make it their own. Of course, color, like I said, definitely plays a huge part. Just look at your shelves out there in the markets and you'll see people relate to brands quite immediately in a shop via a color palette, maybe a certain differentiation in a color palette.
And then how do we make this happen is by designing a visual language which basically turns the design strategy into design directions. Now look at the word strategy being the broader, let's say, of course it's a direction, but it has a bigger plan, and direction definitely has a specific steps essentially that you can execute. And so what ma'am said, that turning that intangible attitude into tangible outcomes, this is what your visual language essentially does with the look and feel and tone of the voice, which is rooted in the personality, the core values. So everything is connected. We keep saying that in design, that design doesn't work in isolation, but even the design process doesn't work in isolation. We always have to keep in mind where we started and where we are headed. So to sort of sum it up, let's go through a quick case study.
So after putting out so many very, very vital terms in branding or brand design, let's look at a story. Let's look at how a certain brand is built. This particular story was shared with me via one of our ex-students, an alumni, who studied from the first batch that passed out from the BDES program. He was working with future groups, and this was his initial level of explorations that was done, and how the brand was being built is what he shared with me. I've pulled out some of the context here to establish how a brand story is developed from understanding the core and finally coming out not just with visual language, but with certain ways in which that visual language is articulated across certain touch points. So the case study here is about housing.com. I'm sure you all heard about it. There were these large, brilliant, vibrant hoardings out there a couple of years back. The once upon functional and mundane subject of homes, housing, buying a house, renting a house has become aggressively aspirational. The target audience shifting from the older age group to a much younger, a much more affluent target audience that can or could afford engaging in this particular activity. So nuancing the individuality of the this young ambitious consumer, it called for telling colorful, vibrant stories to spell out an emotion of celebration. It is a celebration for a youngster when he buys a home, when he rents a home, when he crafts his home to extend his personality via it. So Shobit told me this story and developed context with reference to mind maps, moving into
the
color.
Looking at the color palette and the developing of the visual language, in basically it started with that aggressively aspirational value, and then making it, of course, it has to be translated through visual design, through colors and the visual design that is done.
So for these youngsters, moving up was the core of the brand, and as led by Chahal and the way he projected it, the look up as the upward pointing arrow mark was the way in which they wanted to extend a very simple cue, a very simple alignment to what they were talking about, what the brand was offering. As you can see here, this is a flexible brand identity, which means it doesn't have to stay within one color palette or one color context. It moves through all these four, because with celebration as the quotient, the pink, yellow, blue, green were the best ways to extend a context like this, an offering of this kind to the young Indians, to the young millennials.
And so with ambitious vision of to help the world live better. Very, very crucial words to guide us through the process, that to outsee, to outthink, to outdo. So the exuberance that the brand is proposing to what used to be, like we started with a very mundane or not so exciting space to begin with. So look up to the brand for a better life. So this became such a strong guidance for the visual design as well, to move that strategy to a design direction. So
it had an emotional quotient which had to be established through very, very specific tangibles. So look up and the arrow were great cues, but then there were other aspects of the brand such as optimism, the aspirational quotient, the elegance of the brand, the confident, clear, passionate, game-changing experience that had to be established. And in that, what he did in terms of converting a very, very mundane, very, very typical, technical, very, very official looking context business to a slightly more emotional one was the huge challenge. He extended the basic 4-color palette to its variants. And here you see its other color extensions, as in the secondary and the tertiary color palette coming into play. You will see that actually extended across some of these collaterals in the way that they work. If you see that ad on the right, the one that says "we love data," those were some of their first initial ads that reached out to people to give in inputs regarding who they were, what they wanted in terms of homes, what they were looking for in terms of housing. And there then, as you can see, the simple logic was moving from RBGY definitely as the basic color palette, but just look at how this color palette has become slightly more vibrant, slightly more unified in the way that it works well together, but also creating a benchmark in the way that a brand of this kind, a business of this kind, which had typically been housing in terms of, very, very official red and blues, changed to a very vibrant space because the target audience changed, because their aspirations demanded for something like this to be seen. These are some more aspects where the brand stretched itself to establish its presence. Interesting ads here where even the touch points that were used had very interesting ideologies extended in the typography. So if you're looking at the wording per se here, they say super attitude wanted, superhumans wanted in terms of people that they were hiring for their brand. If you go to the next few touch points, you would see the t-shirt of possibly one of the marketeers wearing something that looked up, and in those various arrows you will see certain aspirational quotes or thoughts being extended. The most interesting thing to really understand was about when it was supposed to be launched. So it couldn't have been a better timing to align the brand launch except with aligning it to a certain specific season that amply meant celebration. So Holi was the launch pad and the colors suited the whole context. We all buy homes, we all rent homes, we all move into new homes on auspicious occasions, Diwali and others being some of them. But here, for the youngsters and celebration being the core, Holi was possibly a great, great idea, and that's what this brand was all about. So, having told you this one brand story and just a gist of how the whole visual language or the look and feel and also the vital touch points of the brand were crafted, let's move to questions.
Yes. So that's it for Brands Ki Baatein from us. We are really eager to know what questions you have, what doubts or insightful observations you have, and we'll try to answer them. Please write your questions in the chat box and we will get to them. It's so curious that like this one design process of any brand is, we sometimes forget that it also has to be timed. Yeah. This Holi thing is such a interesting thing to notice.
So that's what strategic design is all about in terms of when a celebratory context can get the right kind of a... So the color palette actually developed because Holi was the launch pad.
Yeah.
So if you don't have any questions right now, we are eagerly looking forward to your questions. Do send them in, do put them up, and we'll be happy to answer them right here in this space. And feel free to connect with either me or Parag at any point in the future. Looking forward to your feedback, looking forward to your queries. That's all for now. Thanks a ton.
Thank you so much. You can always look up more information on the website, on the Instagram of MIT Institute of Design. There is MIT GD Instagram handle where you will get to see work of our students from MIT Institute of Design Graphic Design Department. And of course, Ranjana ma'am and I, we are accessible for any of your queries and doubts. The questions, if you have about admissions, please contact the admission cell for your doubts and queries. There is one tiny announcement which I would like to make, that the extension of the application date, it's till 20th March now. So you have enough time to send in your applications to be part of the MIT ID Institute as aspiring designers. And that's it from us for now, and I'll hand it over to Bhavika for conclusion. Over to you, Bhavika.
Thank you. So yes, I would like to thank Dr. Ranjana and Professor Parag for the most interesting and inspiring session. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to all our supporters and technical team. And yes, lastly, I request the technical team to please play the AV of MIT Institute of Design. Thank you. Thank you all.
I make the world graphical.
I add value through my products.
I am an animator.
I am a filmmaker. I develop trends.
I transform designs to reality.
I create environments.
I translate stories to furniture.
I design experiences. I'm an immersive media designer.
I design mobility.
This is not only a design institute.
This is a design lab.
Join us in our design movement.